maintained by the Woodland Playreaders. Should the alarm sound, I will contact the concierge for more information. If it's a true emergency, those people who can move unassisted must leave the room. Any persons requiring mobility devices should remain seated until someone comes to help them out. And please, please, turn off your cell phones or anything else that makes a terrible noise. Once, by American writer Grace Paley, is the opening story from the author's 1974 collection, Enormous Changes at the Last Minute. It is also our opening story this evening. At about 800 words, the story could be considered a work of flash fiction. Flash fiction is a brief narrative that still offers character and plot development. It has roots going back to Aesop's fables. In our first offering this evening, we find our narrator, read by Barbara Lee Rubin, sitting on the steps of the neighborhood library.
Once, I saw my ex-husband in the street. I was sitting on the steps of the new library. "Hello, my life," I said. We had once been married for 27 years, so I felt justified. He said, "What? What life? No life of mine." I said, "Okay. I don't argue when there's real disagreement." I got up and went into the library to see how much I owed them. The librarian said $32 even, and you've owed it for 18 years. I didn't deny anything, because I don't understand how time passes. I've had those books. I've often thought of them. The library is only 2 blocks away. My ex-husband followed me into the book return room. He interrupted the librarian, who had more to tell. "In many ways," he said, as I look back, "I attribute the disillusionment of our marriage to the fact that you never invited the Bertrams to dinner." "That's possible," I said. "But really, if you remember, first my father was sick that Friday, and then the children were born. And then I had those Tuesday night meetings, and then the war began. Then we didn't seem to know them anymore. But you're right. I should have had them to dinner." I gave the librarian a check for $32. Immediately, she trusted me, put my past behind me, wiped the record clean, which is just what most other municipal and or state bureaucracies will not do. I checked out the 2 Edith Wharton books I had just returned because I had read them so long ago. But they were more apropos now than ever. They were The House of Mirth and the Children, which is about life in the United States, in New York, in 27 years, 50 years ago. A nice thing I do remember is breakfast, my ex-husband said. I was surprised. All we ever had was coffee. Then I remembered there was a hole in the wall in the back of the kitchen closet which opened into the apartment next door. There, they always ate sugar-cured bacon. It gave us a grand feeling about breakfast, but we never got stuffed or sluggish. That was when we were poor, I said. When were we ever rich, he said. Oh, as time went on, as our responsibilities increased, we didn't go in need. You took adequate financial care, I reminded him. The children went to camp 4 weeks a year in decent ponchos, sleeping bags, and boots, just like everyone else. They looked very nice. Our place was warm in winter, and we had nice red pillows and things. I wanted a sailboat, he said. But you didn't want anything. Don't be bitter, I said. It's never too late. No, he said, with a great deal of bitterness. I may get a sailboat. As a matter of fact, I have money down on an 18-foot two-rigger. I'm doing well this year and can look forward to better. But as for you, it's too late. You'll always want nothing. He had had a habit throughout the 27 years of making a narrow remark which, like a plumber's snake, could work its way through the ear, down the throat, halfway to my heart. He would then disappear, leaving me choking with equipment. What I mean is, I sat down on the library steps and he went away. I looked through the house of mirth, but lost interest. I felt extremely accused. Now it's true, I'm short of requests and absolute requirements, but I do want something. I want, for instance, to be a different person. I want to be the woman who brings those 2 books back in 2 weeks. I want to be the effective citizen who changes the school system and addresses the Board of Estimate on the troubles of this dear urban center. I had promised my children to end the war before they were out of school. I wanted to have been married forever to one person, my ex-husband or my present one. Either has enough character for a whole life, which, as it turns out, is really not such a long time. You couldn't exhaust either man's qualities or get under the rock of his reasons in one short life. Just this morning, I looked out the window to watch the street for a while and saw that the little sycamores the city had dreamily planted a couple of years before their kids were born had come that day to the prime of their lives. Well, I decided to bring those two books back to the library, which proves that when a person or an event comes along to jolt me or appraise me, I can take some appropriate action, although I'm better known for my hospitable remarks. Thank you.
Our next story, read by Lola Weiss, is called The Loudest Voice. Whether in the form of Christmas trees in town squares or celebrations in public schools, Christmas has occasioned many controversies over the separation of church and state. Many Americans have questioned whether public celebration of a profoundly religious holiday is compatible with a proudly pluralistic society, one that prizes freedom of worship, preventing any establishment of a civil religion. This 1959 short story is told in the voice of Shirley Abramowitz, a Jewish girl in the 1930s who is called upon to narrate her school's Christmas play. Why does Shirley agree to the teacher's request? How do her mother and father respond? What does it suggest about the assimilation of Jews and other non-Christians into America? Similarly, what does Shirley's proud claim to have the loudest voice suggest about her place as a Jew in America?
Is it better?
Okay.
Again?
June? Lola, this is going to be hard. You're going to have to wing it. Welcome to the sound
Shall we
system.
put the broom stand over next to Lola?
I don't
Well,
know.
I don't know, I have to do it this way.
Let's see.
Richard, how about the one that's on the stand?
Let's see. Could you hold this please? Thank you. So much for the fabulous illusion of theater. Okay, see if this works, dear. Go ahead.
The loudest voice.
Nice.
It's okay.
The loudest voice. There is a certain place where dumbwaiters boom, doors slam, dishes crash, every window is a mother's mouth bidding the street to shut up, go skate somewhere else, come home. My voice is the loudest. There, my own mother is still as full of breathing as me, and the grocer stands up to speak to her. Mrs. Abramowitz, he says, people should not be afraid of their children. Ah, Mr. Bialik, my mother replies, if you say to her or her father, shush, they say in the grave they'll be quiet. From Coney Island to the cemetery, says my papa, it's the same subway. It's the same fare. I am right next to the pickle barrel. My pinky is making tiny whirlpools in the brine. I stop for a moment to announce, Campbell's tomato soup, Campbell's vegetable soup, Campbell's Scotch broth. Be quiet, the grocer says. The labels are coming off. Please, Shirley, be a little quiet, my mother begs me. In that place, the whole street groans. Be quiet, but steals from the happy chorus of my inside self. Not a tittle or a jot. There too, just around the corner, is a red brick building that has been old for many years. Every morning, the children stand before it in double lines, which must be straight. They are not insulted, they are waiting anyway. I am usually among them. I am in fact the first, since I begin with an A. One cold morning, the monitor tapped me in the shoulder. Go to room 409, Shirley Abramowitz, he said. I did as I was told. I went in a hurry up a down staircase to room 409, which contained the 6th graders. I had to wait at the desk without wiggling until Mr. Hilton, their teacher, had time to speak. After 5 minutes, he said, Shirley? What? I whispered. He said, my, Shirley Abramowitz, they told me you had a particularly loud, clear voice and read with lots of expression. Could that be true? Oh, yes, I whispered. In that case, don't be silly. I might very well be your teacher someday. Speak up, speak up. Yes, I shouted. More like it, he said. Now, Shirley, can you put a ribbon in your hair or a bobby pin? It's awfully messy. Yes, I bawled. Now, calm down. He turned to the class. Children, not a sound. Open at page 39. Read till 52. And when you finish, start again. He looked me over once more. Now, Shirley, you know, I suppose, that Christmas is coming. We are preparing a beautiful play. Most of the parts have been given out, but I still need a child with a strong voice, lots of stamina. Do you know what stamina is? You do? Smart kid. You know, I heard you read The Lord is My Shepherd in assembly yesterday. I was very impressed. Wonderful delivery. Mrs. Jordan, your teacher, speaks very highly of you. Now listen to me, Shirley Abramowitz. If you want to take the part and be in the play, repeat after me. I swear to work harder than I ever did before. I looked to heaven and I said at once, oh, I swear. I kissed my pinky and looked to God. That is an actor's life, my dear. Usually, like a soldier, never tardy or disobedient to his general, the director. Everything he said, absolutely everything will depend on you. That afternoon, all over the building, children scraped and scrubbed the turkeys and the sheaves of corn off the schoolroom windows. Goodbye, Thanksgiving. The next morning, a monitor brought red paper and green paper from the office. We made new shapes and hung them on the walls and glued them to the doors. The teachers became happier and happier. Their heads were ringing like the bells of childhood. My best friend, Evie, was prone to evil, but she did not get a single demerit for whispering. We learned Holy Night without an error. How wonderful, said Miss Glace, the student teacher, to think that some of you don't even speak the language. We learned Deck the Halls and Hark the Herald Angels. They weren't ashamed, and we weren't embarrassed. Oh, but when my mother heard about it, she said to my father, Misha, you don't know what's going on there. Kramer is the head of the ticket committee. Who? Asked my father. Kramer? Oh, yes, an active woman. Active? Active has to have a reason. Listen, she said sadly, I'm surprised to see my neighbors making a tra-la-la for Christmas. My father couldn't think of what to say to that. Then he decided, you're in America, Clara. You wanted to come here. In Palestine, the Arabs would be eating you alive. In Europe, you had pogroms. Argentina is full of Indians. Here you got Christmas. Some joke, huh? Very funny, Misha. What is becoming of you? If we came to a new country a long time ago to run away from tyranny, and instead we fall into a creeping pogrom, that our children learn a set of lies, so what's the joke? Ah, Misha, your idealism is going away. And so is your sense of humor. That I never had. But idealism you had a lot of. I'm the same Mr. Abramovich. I don't change an iota. Ask anyone. Only ask me, says my mama. May she rest in peace. I got the answer. Meanwhile, the neighbors had to think of what to say too. Marty's father said, you know he has a very important part, my boy. Mine also, said Mrs. Sauerfeld. Not my boy, said Mrs. Clean. I said to him, no. The answer is no, and when I say no, I mean no. The rabbi's wife said, that's disgusting. But no one listened to her. Under the narrow sky of God's great wisdom, she wore a strawberry blonde wig. Every day was busy and full of experience. I was right-hand man. Mr. Hilton said, how could I get along without you, Shirley? He said, your mother and father ought to get down on their knees every night and thank God for giving them a child like you. He also said, you're absolutely a pleasure to work with, my dear, dear child. Sometimes he said, for goodness sakes, what did I do with the script? Shirley, find it. And I answered quietly, here it is, Mr. Hilton. Once in a while, when he was very tired, he would cry out, Shirley, I'm just tired of screaming at those kids. Will you tell Ira Pushkov not to come in till Lester points to that star the second time? And then I roared, Ira Pushkov, what's the matter with you, you dope? Mr. Hilton told you 5 times already, don't come in till Lester points to the star the second time. Clara, my father said, what did you do there till 6 o'clock that you can't even put plates on the table? Christmas, said my mother coldly. Oh, my father said, Christmas, what's the harm? After all, history teaches everyone. We learn from reading that this is a holiday from pagan times also, candles, lights, even Hanukkah. So if they think it's a private holiday, they're only ignorant, not patriotic. What belongs to history belongs to all men. You want to go back to the Middle Ages? Is it better to shave your head with a second-hand razor? Does it hurt Shirley to learn to speak up? It does not. So maybe someday she won't live between the kitchen and the shop. She's not a fool. I thank you, Papa, for your kindness. It is true about me to this day. I am foolish, but I am not a fool. That night, my father kissed me and said with great interest in my career, Shirley, tomorrow's your big day. Congrats. Save it, my mother said. And then she shut all the windows to prevent tonsillitis. In the morning, it snowed. On the street corner, a tree had been decorated for us by a kind city administration. In order to miss its chilly shadow, our neighbors walked 3 blocks east to buy a loaf of bread. The butcher pulled down black window shades to keep the colored lights from shining on his chickens. Oh, not me. On the way to school, with both my hands, I tossed it a kiss of tolerance. Poor thing. It was a stranger in Egypt. I walked straight into the auditorium, past the staring children. Go ahead, Shirley, said the monitors. 4 boys, big for their age, had already started to work as prop men and stagehands. Mr. Hilton was very nervous. He was not even happy. Whatever he started to say ended in a sideward look of sadness. He sat slumped in the middle of the first row, and he asked me to help Miss Glaze. I did this, although she thought my voice was too resonant, and said, show off. Parents began to arrive long before we were ready. They wanted to make a good impression, but from among the yards of drapes, I peeked down at the audience, and I saw my embarrassed mother. Ira, Lester, and Meyer were pasted by their beards by Miss Glaze. She almost forgot to thread the star on the wire, but I reminded her. I coughed a few times to clear my throat. Miss Glaze looked around and saw that everyone was in costume and the line waiting to play his part. She whispered, all right. Then, Jackie Sourfield, the prettiest boy in first grade, parted the curtains with his skinny elbows and in a high voice sang out, parents dear, we are here to make a Christmas play in time. It we give in narrative and illustrate with pantomime. He disappeared. My voice burst immediately from the wings to the great shock of Ira, Lester, and Maya, who were waiting for it, but were surprised all the same. I remember the house where I was born. Miss Glaze yanked the curtain open, and there was the house, an old hayloft where Celia Cornbluth lay on the straw with Candy Lou, her favorite doll. Ira, Lester, and Maya moved slowly from the wings toward her, sometimes pointing to a moving star, and sometimes ahead to Cindy Lou. It was a long story, and it was a sad story. I carefully pronounced all the words about my lonesome childhood, while little Eddie Brownstein wandered upstage and down with the shepherd's stick, looking for sheep. I wrote up lonesomeness again, and not being understood at all, except by some women everybody hated. Eddie was too small for that, and Marty Groff took his place wearing his father's prayer shawl. I announced 12 friends, and half the boys in the 4th grade gathered around Marty, who stood on an orange crate while my voice harangued. Sorrowful and loud, I declaimed about love and God and man, but because of the terrible deceit of Eddie's stock, we came suddenly to a famous moment. Marty, whose remembering tongue I was, waited at the foot of the cross. He stared desperately at the audience. I groaned, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? The soldiers, who were shrieks, grabbed poor Marty to pin him up to die, but he wrenched free, turned again to the audience, and spread his arms aloft to show despair. And in the end, I murmured at the top of my voice, the rest is silence. But as everyone in this room, in this city, in this world now knows, I shall have life eternal. That night, Mrs. Cornblue visited our kitchen for a glass of tea. How's the Virgin? Asked my father with a look of concern. For a man with a daughter, you got a fresh mouth, Abramowitz. Here, said my father kindly, have some lemon. It'll sweeten your disposition. They debated a little in Yiddish, then fell in a puddle of Russian and Polish. And what I understood next was my father, who said, still in all, it was certainly a beautiful affair, you have to admit, introducing us to the beliefs of a different culture. Well, yes, said Mrs. Cornblue, the only thing, Charlie Turner, that cute boy in Cecilia's class, a couple of others, they got very small parts or no part at all. In very bad taste, it seemed to me. After all, it's their religion. Ah, explained my mother, what could Mr. Hilton do? They got very small voices. After all, why should they bother? The English language they know from the beginning by heart. They're blonde like angels. You think it's so important they should get in the play? Christmas? The whole piece of goods? They own it. I listened and listened until I couldn't listen anymore. Too sleepy, I climbed out of bed and kneeled. I made a little church of my hand and said, Hear, O Israel. Then I called out in Yiddish, please, good night, good night. Shh, my father said, shush yourself, and he slammed the kitchen door. I was happy. I fell asleep at once. I had prayed for everybody. My talking family, cousins far away, passerbys, and all the lonesome Christians. I expected to be heard. My voice was certainly the loudest.
There are very many different love stories. Few, however, discuss the kind of love we see in this story. The married couple, at the center of our final story tonight, read by Barbara Lee Rubin, take a trip down memory lane.
Love. First, I wrote this poem. Walking up the slate path of the college park, under the nearly full moon. The brown oak leaves are red as maples. And I have been looking at the young people. They speak and embrace one another. Because of them, I thought I would descend into remembering love. So I let myself down, hand over hand, until my feet touched the earth of the gardens of Vesey Street. I told my husband, I've just written a poem about love. What a good idea, he said. Then he told me about Sally Johnson on Lake Winnipesaukee, who was 12 and a half when he was 14. And then he told me about Rosemary Johansson on Lake Sunapee. And then he told me about Jane Marston on Concord High. And then he told me about Mary Smith of Radcliffe when he was a poet at Harvard. And then he told me about two famous poets, one fair and one dark, both now dead, when he was a secret poet working at an acceptable trade in an office without windows. When at last he came to my time, that is the past 15 years or so, he told me about Dottie Wasserman. Hold on, I said. What do you mean, Dottie Wasserman? She's a character in a book. She's not even a person. Okay, he said. And why Vesey Street? What's that? Well, it's nothing special. I used to be in love with a guy who was a shrub buyer. Vesey Street was the downtown garden center of the city, when the city still had wonderful centers of commerce. I used to walk the kids there when they were little carriage babies, half asleep, maybe take the ferry to Hoboken. Years later, I'd bike down there Sundays and ride round and round. I even saw him about 3 times. No kidding, said my husband. How come I don't know this guy? The stupidity of the beloved. It's you, I said. Anyway, what's this baloney about you and Dottie Wasserman? Nothing much. She was this crazy kid who hung around the bars, but she didn't drink. Really, it was for the men, you know. Neither did I drink too much. I was just hoping to get laid once in a while, maybe meet someone and fall madly in love. He is that romantic. Sometimes I wonder if loving me in this homey life, in middle age, with 2 sets of bedroom slippers, one a skin of sandal for the summer, the other pair with cozy sheepskin. It must be a disappointing experience for him. He made a polite bridge over my conjectures. He said, she was also this funny mother in the park when we were all doing that municipal politics, and I was married to Josephine. Dottie and I were both delegates to that famous Kansas City National Meeting of Town Meetings, NMTM. Remember? Some woman. No, I said, that's not true. She was made up, just plain invented in the late 50s. Oh, he said, then it was after that. I must have met her afterward. He is stubborn. So I dropped the subject and went to get the groceries. Our shrinking family requires more coffee, more eggs, more cheese, less butter, less meat, less orange juice, more grapefruit. Walking along the street, encountering no neighbor, I hummed up and down a little tune and continued jostling time with the help of my nice reconnoitering brain. Here I was, experiencing the old earth of Vesey Street, breathing in and out with more attention to the process than is usual in the late morning. All because of love, probably. How interesting it glides to solid invented creatures from true remembered wraiths. By God, I thought, the lover is real. The heart of the lover continues. It has been propagandized from birth. I passed our local bookstore, which was doing well, with the joy of all sex underpinning its prosperity. The owner gave me, a dependable customer of poorly advertised books, an affectionate smile. He was a great success. He didn't know that 3 years later, his rent would be tripled. He would become a sad failure, and the landlord, feeling himself brilliant, an outwitting entrepreneur, a star in the microeconomic heavens, would be the famous success. From half a block away, I could see the kale in the grocer's bin, crumbles of ice shining the dark leaves. In interior counter view, I imagined my husband's northern country fields, the late autumn frost in the curly green. I began to mumble a new poem. In the grocer's bin, the green kale shines. In the north country, it stands sweet with frost. Dark and curly in the garden of tan hay and light white snow. Light white. Light white. I said that a couple of times. I said that a couple of questioning times. Suddenly, my outside eyes saw a fine-looking woman named Margaret, who hadn't spoken to me in 2 years. We'd had many years of political agreement before some matters relating to the Soviet Union separated us. In the angry months during which we were both right in many ways, she took away with her to her political position and daily friendship my own best friend, Louise. My lifelong park, PTA, and anti-war movement sister, Louise. In a hazy litter of love and leafy green vegetables, I saw Margaret's good face, and before I remembered our serious difference, I smiled. At the same moment, she knew me and smiled. So foolish is the true love when responded to that I took her hand as we passed, bent to it, pressed it to my cheek, touched it to my lips. I described this to my husband at supper time. He was happy to explain everything. The smile was for Margaret, but you know you miss Louise a lot. And the kiss was for Louise. We both said, ah. Then we talked over the way the SALT treaty looked more like a floor than a ceiling, read a poem written by one of his daughters, looked at a TV show telling the destruction of the European textile industry, and made love. In the morning, he said, "You're some lover, you know." He said, "You really are. You remind me a lot of Dottie Wasserman."
All right, folks. Thank you very much for coming. Safe trip home.
That was great. Wasn't it fun? It was very good.
From the first sentence. And a left.
I say that's the point.
No, you have it.